You are now watching the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. We will be going live shortly. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.
Shallow right field, stumbling start for Stewart. Throws to deep left field by Alvarez. He's homered in 4 straight games for the second time in his. He's homered in 4.
What is up to all you lovely Mets fans? It's another episode of the Mets Spring Training live stream here right on the True Mets Talk podcast. I have a wonderful guest with me today. Actually covers the St. Lucie Mets, and I'm very, very excited for this conversation. It's been a little bit of planning to make this happen, but we finally have arrived at the day. Ernest, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This should be a very fun conversation. Like I said, Ernest is definitely in tune with all the prospects that the Mets minor league system has to offer. Some names that we'll be getting into a little bit later. Obviously, the most popular prospects, but some under the radar prospects as well that we're going to talk about. We're going to start off with a little bit of a Mets Nationals recap from today, and we'll see where the night takes us, where this conversation is going to take us. It's a lot of good Mets talk, but I want to shout out all of the lovely people in this chat right now. We got Darren, member of the channel, checking in. We got Lane checking in. I appreciate you. Thank you, Lane, for the support. Thank you to Carlos Ortiz for the support, saying salute CP and everyone in the chat. And we got Carlos Ramos in the chat as well. Make sure you all are hitting on that like button. If you are not a member of the channel yet, make sure you join the channel as soon as you're done watching this live stream. And as always, hit the live chat with your thoughts and comments. Ernest, before we get into anything, I just want you to talk about what sort of projects do you have going on that's Mets related? Where can everyone find you? And by the way, if you do not subscribe to Ernest's YouTube page, make sure you go do that. A lot of great Mets prospect interviews going on. But just take this time a little bit to tell the people what you got going on in your world with Mets stuff.
I know I'm trying to get on your level, man. Trying to do better stuff with the YouTube channel. I've been at this game for, I think this is like season 11 or year 11 for me, kind of doing the sports content thing. And right now, recently through the off season, I've been interviewing some players, including Mike Vassell, one of the top pitching prospects. So I've been interviewing multiple minor leaguers. It's kind of my thing. Talk to the minor leaguers. Sometimes I talk to certain coaches. So on the YouTube channel, you can find some of my recent interviews, including Tyler Stewart, one of the most recent ones that I put up. And then obviously, find me on this Twitter X or whatever we feel like calling it at this point. And then, otherwise also shout out to, I could also be seen and heard also on sportswireradio.org and also for maxmets.blogspot.com. I try to put a little pen to pad, AKA use a computer because no one writes anymore for newspapers. So those some of the publications and the radio stations that I'm a part of. And I'm trying to get my face out there. Usually I always tell the players, like, I really just want to showcase your face and your voice, but I guess you're going to be stuck with me a little bit more now as I build the YouTube channel as well to provide all the Mets and mostly minor league information.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you all are out there watching this and are interested in more Mets blogs and more Mets interviews and videos in general, obviously getting into the deeper of the prospect sort of world, if you want to learn about more prospects and just sort of get a little bit more of a personal feel to these prospects, like you mentioned, Tyler Stewart, Mike Vassell, and all these great interviews that Ernest is doing, make sure you all go over and follow him on X at Ernest Dove and the same YouTube handle. And the link to Ernest's YouTube is going to be actually in the description of this video down below. So as you're watching, go venture over there, hit that subscribe button. And I believe you're almost at 300 subscribers. So you are well on your way there. Hopefully everyone can help you out in the chat. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the Mets and how this spring training has gone. Obviously, they played a game today. I'm not going to lie to you. I was a little bit busy before we started this stream. I didn't get to watch a little bit. I didn't get to watch too much of this game. I'm not sure if you did as well, but we do have our box score. The Mets dropped the 16th game of this spring training by a score of 4-1 to the Washington Nationals. Ernest, did you watch this game? If you did, what are some things that you noticed? Obviously, the hitting side of it, you can see the box score wasn't really much to write home about. The Mets scored their lone run off of, I believe, was a bases-loaded walk by Starling Marte for that RBI. But how do you think, just in general, this spring training is going for the New York Mets? One thing that I like to see in the box score is Jose Quintana and those numbers that he is officially putting up this spring training. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, obviously the recent joke of the week on social media on Mets Twitter is about, well, they have the lowest ERA in like Major League Baseball in spring, and everyone thinks it's hilarious. But I love the idea of it simply because these guys are pitching. Like Quintana, like you said, to go 4 innings with no runs. You got McGill with his new pitch. I don't want to sit here and compare it to some Kodai Senga forkball or anything, but you got McGill with a different pitch. You've got Quintana, the kind of the consistency guy, which is why he was brought in anyway. So if he looks the part, you got the consistency. Then you got Severino just basically on the mound all spring. So this is what we're looking toward. Maybe he was tipping pitches. I don't know what some of the theories were of him last year, along with the health concerns. But that's my biggest take for the entire spring to this point is that Marte is playing, and the pitchers, spring or not, Double-A, major league bats, like they're throwing a lot of zeros. So they're all eating innings. Marte is actually playing. Diaz just pitched. Nimmo quietly just having a nice, good spring stats-wise. I mean, some of the guys are putting it together. Alvarez has all the home runs. He looks like he's ready for another like 30 home run season to come at this point. Those are the things I'm excited about. But again, the pitching, at least it looks good. Even the younger guys we could talk about, like Nate Lavender and Paul Gervais, they're getting in there, throwing some innings when they can. It's fun stuff to see for the future and the present.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And a lot of people are like, they hop on the train of this is just spring. Obviously, the results reset at the end of the day when opening day rolls around. But I like to go based off of, right, what we as Mets fans and people who actually talk about this team have to show for here in 2024 very early on. We have a lack of a sample size. We understand it's only 16 games in, but the way we are assessing this team, especially after the debacle of a season that we witnessed last year in 2023, we're seeing some very good signs, especially with some guys that are definitely going to need to be key parts of contributors to this team in 2024. The pitching is one thing that I definitely look at, and we'll get to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit more about the ins and outs of that pitching and that little fun stat of the lowest ERA so far in spring training. But also, guys, like you said, Marte, at least he's out there, double groin surgery, double groin injury. Good that he's finally healthy, right? His results right now are one thing, but I'm looking at the processes of all of these players. We can talk about when we get to the slide after that with this whole JD Martinez rumor as it pertains to Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos. That's a whole discussion we're going to have here up as well. There's a lot of good stuff going on, right? And you see in this game directly, just to speak a little bit before we move on. Obviously, I didn't really watch too much of this game. I can't really say what the ins and outs of the results were or the processes were here. But this was your B lineup, right? This is your C lineup, your D lineup. You're not throwing out guys. This is not your opening day lineup, right? Nimmo, Bader's going to be in there. Alonso's going to be in there. Marte's going to be in there. But the rest of these guys, I mean, it is what it is. Narvaez is a bench piece. Iglesias probably going to start in the minor leagues. Same thing with Zach Short and Yolmer Sanchez as well. So we can't put too much stock into this one game. But like you said, there's a lot of good stuff happening and a lot of good stuff that the Mets can definitely build on as we move forward in this spring training and as we see extended versions of these pitchers, right? Lucchesi made his debut, 1.1 innings pitched, obviously had a rocky go of it, 4 hits, 4 earned runs, not what you want to see. Not what you want to see at all. But nonetheless, it's good that he's out there because I was waiting myself personally. We've seen the Butos. We've seen the McGills. What do we get from Joey Lucchesi this year? Does he even make the opening roster, the opening day roster? That's the sort of conversations now as we're 16 going on 17 games in that we have to start talking about. But also getting extended looks at these pitchers like Jose Quintana. They're not just throwing 1 or 2 innings now. They're extending 4, 5 innings even. So this is something that I like, and this is something that we're going to continue to see. But I just wanted to get I guess the box score up here. I'm not sure if you have anyone else directly on this screen that you want to talk about, but we can get into a little bit more of the juicier, the meatier parts of this episode of why I really wanted you to be on here and sort of get your thoughts out there because we roster construction wise, Ernest. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss with a couple different avenues of where this team can go. But just real quickly, closing out this 4-1 loss to the Nationals. Anything else directly on this topic?
I mean, it's just one of those things. What are the expectations? Like for Bader, even for spring stats, he's been playing. So as far as I know, Bader's healthy all spring. But how's he going to hit? He hasn't been hitting in spring while being healthy. So that could be a quote unquote concern of sorts. It's pretty interesting. Narvaez, I swear, every time Narvaez is in the box score, I was like, oh, yeah, Narvaez is still on the team. Guys, really, he would be like the highest paid player right now in the A's, and here he is, the backup catcher on the Mets.
Right.
It's pretty interesting that he's even like still there, which is kind of hilarious. But it's hard to really what you want to see from this stuff. Like Iglesias, I don't know how many more hits he would have to get every day to have a shot somewhere to steal somebody's spot, but he kind of pulled an offer for the day. Alonso with some Ks, I really don't care. I mean, listen, this is for spring. But yeah, the main thing is they're out there. I'm excited about the pitching overall. I mean, for a Reed Garrett, it's just good when guys throw zeros when they're fighting for spots. I mean, at least we can talk about guys having a competition at the end of the bullpen. Like you were saying with Lucchesi, I'm just glad he pitched. I was thinking, obviously, before Senga injury, Lucchesi, McGill, Buto, is one of them going to be a long man? Can one of them still be a long man, depending on who's going to be breaking camp right now with Hauser having a good start? So if they can come together with a pretty decent rotation, fill of like SP4, SP5 guys, which seems to it makes a lot of people angry, but this is the Mets. Behind Senga, you basically have an entire rotation of guys that would be considered mid to back end rotation guys, other than maybe Severino at his absolute best, or maybe Manaea with his new pitch. Again, that's where all the ifs come in.
I agree with you. And that's a perfect segue, and that's a perfect transition into the next topic. And I'm going to prop that slide. I'm glad you said about the pitching, because we are going to talk all about the pitching now here with this graphic, this lovely graphic per SNY of the Mets actually heading into tonight's matchup with the lowest ERA amongst all teams in spring training so far. Obviously, a fun little statistic. How much weight does it carry for the overall season? Not much, but you can also look at it on the other side of they're performing well early, and the confidence level of these guys, especially one of Tyler McGill, looks night and day different than maybe down the stretch of last year or the year before that. So I just want to shout out everybody in the chat. Everybody keep dropping your comments. We're going to get to them as we go by, as we go through the stream. We got Ibby from the Till Mets Do Us Part podcast. CP Ernest, what up, boys? He's checking in. Ibby, thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. We got Patty in the chat agreeing with you. Bader with the great glove, but what are we really going to get from the bat? Absolutely. That's the biggest question mark. And that also, we can talk a little bit more when we talk about prospects and their immediate impact for the Mets in 2024. A little bit of a name of Drew Gilbert as it pertains to the outfield. So we'll keep monitoring that as well. Let's see here. We got a couple of other. Ricardo, member of the channel. I definitely appreciate the support, Ricardo, that you show me. Michael Tonkin, another pitcher here that was a great find by David Stearns this past offseason that not many people were talking about in Atlanta Brave last year when he first signed to the Mets. Nobody was really talking about Michael Tonkin. I think that me and a handful of other content creators were crazy enough to discuss Michael Tonkin and that movement that he has with that sweeper, slider, slurve, whatever you want to call it. But he's having a quietly great spring so far as well. And Ricardo's saying Michael Tonkin will be the second option for that long man option. So, Ernest, I wanted to get let's just do, I guess, a whole synopsis of not only the starting rotation, but also the bullpen, because you mentioned the back end of that bullpen or the early spots of that bullpen of who's going to get that long man, who's going to be that kind of 6th, 7th spot, roster spot in that bullpen, but also the starting rotation. So let's start the starting rotation. Opening day starter. This is a very heavy topic for Mets fans, and this has been debated on my channel. I've had this debate countless of times. You got three names here. What is we all know who the three names are, right? McGill, Severino, Quintana. What would be your preference? Who do you think gets that spot? And if it's not those three guys, who do you think it might be?
Well, I did make that joke like a few weeks ago on social media when, by the way, the last time that McGill ended up pitching opening day, didn't the Mets win 101 games that year? So maybe, let the magic happen again. So, I mean, I don't even know at this point if the Mets are just going to kind of go with a certain rotation of sorts now in spring, and whoever's close enough, they're going to start. You can almost go that route. Are they going to play some analytics game at the end? Like, okay, well, opening day, should they go with the lefty Quintana maybe? Or otherwise, do we have a new and improved Severino? And you're like, let's roll with it. And just for the stories alone between the Mets and Yankees, I'm sure the national media will have a lot of fun with that. There's a lot of ways to go. I guess unjoke aside, I would like the idea of seeing McGill do it again just because of the hard work he's put in. Whatever happens the whole season, we have no idea. And I know when he tailored off towards the end of the year, it was more about innings crunches and his health, and he wasn't really used to bulking up those kind of innings. That was my reasoning to give him an excuse anyway. So I think it'd be pretty interesting to just go McGill or just go Severino just for the headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I agree with you. Like, you talk about needing to start the season off with a bang, right? Like, after this debacle of a 2023, how do you start this 2024? My gut, like, if I had to choose right now, it would be Luis Severino. Like, what more confidence can you give a guy that posted north of a 6.8 ERA last season for the New York Yankees than saying, hey, listen, we believe in you. There's a reason why you're here. And oh, by the way, it's still a contract year for you to earn that next contract. Here's the ball on opening day against the Milwaukee Brewers and show us what you got. That's my reasoning. But if I had to guess, a little bit of the safer route would be Jose Quintana. But like you said, if you want to stick with that classic Tyler McGill opening day starter, yes, the last time the Mets were competitive and over 100-game winners, Tyler McGill did get the ball for that opening day. So that's a little bit of a fun question. But as it pertains to Luis Severino, this is going to be an X factor for this rotation, especially in the absence of Kodai Senga. Now, I've myself put some lofty expectations already on Luis Severino. And I've threw myself out there, and a lot of people are like, pump the brakes on that. You see what he posted last season. We'll see if he stays healthy. I like his arsenal of pitches, and I think he's due for that bounce back year. And maybe that's just me being a homer. Maybe that's just me being optimistic. But I am liking, just gut feeling wise, everything that I'm seeing so far early from Luis Severino. What are your expectations realistically for Luis Severino? And that's a broad sort of question, right? And I hate to throw that on you, but like, you don't have to give me sort of wins and losses or innings totals pitched because we know what the projections are, right? They're projecting him at like 136, 137 innings, somewhere around there. They're projecting him at 26 games started. We know what the projections are. But Ernest, you personally, how big of a contribution do you think he's going to make? Do you think he can stay healthy? And do you think that he can have an overall bounce back year from that debacle of a season we saw from him last season?
I mean, you'd like to think so. We're not talking about some guy in his like late 30s just trying to hang on. He's a guy not too far removed from that 3-ish ERA kind of guy, which is something I would be very happy with. So throwing out some numbers in the archaic ERA stat that I know a lot of the younger folks are not very happy with these days. But if he could be one of those guys with the 3-something, I don't know, 350 or 340, somewhere around a decent ERA, but obviously, yeah, just getting out there. If he made 25 starts, that might be a really good season for Severino, depending on, again, the other factors. If he's healthy the whole year, the whole thing about tipping pitches, I mean, if there's some combination of things, and by the way, one thing we haven't talked about with the fake stats in spring with pitching, it also, some of the stuff that's been brought up is defensively, the Mets defensively in the games have looked pretty good all spring as well, whoever's getting thrown in there, but maybe it's other factors in play. Again, the Mets now have a pitching lab. So they got the pitching lab. They have an extra analytics department. Are we finally heading into that territory for the Mets organization with all the extra resources? Maybe it's even helping the defense, even in spring. Maybe certain guys are getting those little cards in their faces. Maybe they're being put in better positions. So even a guy like Manaea, guy like Severino, McGill now testing out his new stuff, being healthy. When you have a bit of a stronger defense behind you, which again is the whole Harrison Bader thing again, if you have Bader out there, at least physically out there in the field, we don't got to worry about the lineup right now. But if he's out there, Lindor's doing his thing, we probably have to worry about other positions out there. But if Marte is healthy, that means the arm is going to be there. Nimmo in left could be pretty strong because he was already becoming very strong in center field last year. So that's why some of the defense, maybe figure out third base and see what Alonso's giving you at first on the corners. McNeil's usually pretty solid anyway. It's going to be pretty interesting to see if he can maintain certain things with the other factors, with the lab, with the defense, and with the analytics.
And that's something too, like that also extends beyond, like, that defense is something that David Stearns prioritized, right? Run prevention. We all know that this offseason. And I think it's more so like we know that Luis Severino has that high strikeout capability, right? We understand that this arsenal of pitches backs itself up, right? History-wise. But other pitchers fall into this category as well. Adrian Hauser, I think, is going to have a huge year for the Mets. And I think that he does this very well, that I think a lot of other pitchers need to start realizing that they are able to do with that defense that you just named behind them. It's pitching more to contact and getting those specialty outs, whether it's through the ground or through the air, however you want to sort of draw that out. But Adrian Hauser, high ground ball pitcher. He's been that for quite some time in the Milwaukee Brewers organization. We know that. He can pitch to contact, and I want to see the rest of the staff trust this defense behind them, and maybe better results, like you said, will absolutely come. That's definitely a smart process that I would like to see be carried out as well. But let's just get back into the chat here. Just want to see what the people are saying as well. Want to make this interactive. We have a new member on the channel. Shout out to Patty. I appreciate you, Patty. Longtime support of the channel. It means a lot. Thank you so much for the support. And like I said, guys, if you haven't joined the channel memberships, 2 great options available for you all. And with the second option, you get a complimentary CPNYSports long sleeve t-shirt sent directly to you. Let's see what other people are saying as well. Ibby saying, I have no problem with any of those 3. I said Quintana on his podcast, mainly because he viewed Quintana as the type of choice this offseason has been. Yeah. Old, reliable lefty, try and jump the scoreboard and play. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. I agree with you. And that's why I think, Ibby, I think we're agreeing on that. And I think this is what you're saying with this comment, is that he is just the safer choice in general, right? You know we're going to get out of Jose Quintana. The consistency probably is not going to be an issue with him. Veteran lefty, I like it. But for me, the home run choice, the home run type hitter choice from the mound is going to be Luis Severino. Like, I get it, Tyler McGill. Let's stick with the consistency. But for me, man, I'm sorry, with the lofty expectations that I just said, it's got to be Luis Severino. But no, I definitely agree with everything that you said here, Ibby. And Carlos checking out. He said, where'd you get the hat? Oh, yes, New Era. Courtesy of New Era. New Mets trucker hat, all black. I appreciate it. Hopefully you are enjoying as well. I got a lot of new hats. I got Savannah Bananas hat. I got the Sandlot, the Beast hat. I got a whole plethora of hats here for this upcoming season. Yeah, absolutely. And yes, Patty's saying, yes, thank you. Thank you so much for the support, Patty. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Adrian Hauser, we know we're going to get consistently with Adrian Hauser. It really is, to me, about how the Mets choose to prioritize either that 5 or 6 man opening day rotation. Now, I've said time and time again, especially here recently, you got 13 pitching spots to work with, and this is where the bullpen kind of sets in here, right? We could start talking about your Nate Lavenders, your Shintaro Fujinamis. Do the Mets open up, in your mind, realistically, with a 5-man rotation or a 6-man rotation, or is it going to be that classic 5-man with a spot starter? Let's say it is a guy like Joey Lucchesi, or a guy who's looked even better this spring in Jose Butto. How do you think of those 13 spots is going to shake out? 5 for the rotation, 8 for the bullpen, or vice versa? You can have an everyday 6-day starter to open up the season, 6 starters, and 7 bullpen guys. What do you think, Ernest?
Yeah, I'm just thinking without Senga, I'm thinking maybe they want to try to go the route. Can't remember if the manager talked about it briefly somewhere in spring, where you may want to try to use the off days, early on, more than just go with a 6-man rotation. So
Right.
I would think maybe it could be best to just figure out a 5-man rotation, figure out how to work around the days off. And that's where the long man situation is going to come in. Because again, certain guys in my head, I was thinking a Hauser guy might have been one of those SP5, SP6 kind of guys. So with guys getting bumped up, but what about the health of certain? I mean, it's going to be, I want to see how it plays out, but it might be better maybe to just go with the 5-man, figure it out. The long man situation, who's going to be the guy? Is Tonkin the guy? Or Sean Reed Foley's he's looking good, right? He's healthy. He's throwing bullets out there. So guys like that, another guy, younger-ish guy making another comeback. So maybe some of these guys will be able to eat the innings in between. I know everyone hates Drew Smith, but he's still here. If he's pitching in the 5th and 6th inning and not the 8th, maybe people are okay with him. So now you got Diaz back. You got Raley looking pretty solid. Raley and Quintana are 2 quiet lefties that are just in camp throwing. So some of those guys, it looks like things might be working out a little better. I mean, me, the minor league junkie in me, I'm long since beyond the idea of I don't think they're going to rush anybody up. I don't think a Mike Vassal's going to break camp. So going with the veterans, maybe not want to push it going 6, figure out the off-day schedule, pick the 5, see how many innings they can eat in the first month of the season. But then again, yeah, that's where the long man situation is going to come to play. And then obviously pitching and defense, because if the score gets run up, we're going to do this whole thing again already in the first month. Oh, no, he's out of there in the 3rd inning. And we're going to be doing this like we do every year, it seems like, at least especially in June. So thinking good health, let's go with 5. Let's figure out the bullpen, who's going to make it, who's not. And let's just go with the pretty much standard thing for right now.
Yeah, and let's figure that out. Before we get into that, there's over 50 people in this chat watching this right now. I heavily appreciate you all. Whether you're watching on YouTube or X, go over to the YouTube, hit that thumbs up for me. Everyone in the chat, if you can hit that thumbs up, it helps the podcast grow, and it helps me also get my name out there as well. So make sure you're hitting that thumbs up, subscribing if you're new, and also going down to the description down below and subscribing to Ernest's YouTube. Make sure we get him on the fast track to 300 subscribers. Let's figure out this bullpen. Let's figure it out. This is going to be a very interesting conversation because I think that the Mets and David Stearns have done a great job this offseason, knowing what we know about this staff and how they looked last year and struggling to get through 5 innings pitched, struggling to get to that 6th inning and beyond. They have set themselves up very well for longevity and for a backup option for these early innings if the starters don't pan out in a particular game, right? That was a little bit of a struggle for the Mets last season. So Ricardo here is proposing this as his 8 for the bullpen. Diaz, Raley, Ottavino, Lopez, Austin Adams you have. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of names going on in here. Drew Smith, goodbye. You see it on your screen. Yes, a lot of people on my channel and on X, there's a lot of Drew Smith see you later talk on here. And honestly, I can't blame him at this point, but I do think he's going to get that last chance with the Mets this season. We know the mainstays of this bullpen and what they're going to be. Edwin Diaz. We cannot go through this live stream without talking about the electricity that we saw in yesterday's game. Edwin Diaz, first time back in live game action on the mound. What was it, striking out 3? I unfortunately couldn't watch that game either, but I believe he struck out all 3 batters.
Yeah, he did, right? He struck out, came in, struck everyone out, and sat down. So that's how you want to do it.
14 pitches, no less, too. So, that's exactly the sort of version of Edwin Diaz. Doesn't skip a beat. That's what we're expecting out of Edwin Diaz. So, we know Edwin Diaz is going to be there. We know Jake Diekman's going to be there, presumably, I would probably think. Raley, Ottavino, and Lopez. Those are your 5 mainstays that I just named. Edwin Diaz, Jake Diekman, Brooks Raley, Adam Ottavino, and Jorge Lopez. That if you disagree with any of those names, Ernest, first off, let's start with that. Do you disagree with any of those 5?
Well, it's one of those. The thing about with the Adam and Lopez, now you're going on certain other talent and the tools over a Fujinami who does have the one more option year left, so you can do it to him. And Drew Smith ain't going. Drew Smith apparently is like the longest tenured Met at this point, which is like kind of hilarious, semi-sad, but that's where we're at. I guess shout out forever to Lucas Duda, one way or another, for better or worse, for giving us Drew Smith. That would be the route. He's going to be on the team. Was Lopez on the 40-man? So if you have some of the 40-man guys and Fujinami's might get kind of like sent back, hopefully for good reasons, as long as he's good and healthy, not the worst case scenario, because regardless, a lot of these guys are getting into the majors regardless. We already know what's going to happen inevitably in the rotation and the pen. So if you're able to go that route, I would still be okay with it because, again, a lot's going to happen even in the first month of the season. Even with best case scenarios, Senga's going to come back. Guys are going to start dropping. Maybe one of the rotation guys moves into a long man spot. So those are the kind of the ways you can try to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. There's a lot of different ways they can play this, but the conversation I've been having here on this channel and trying to figure out this opening day roster from a pitching perspective is who's going to get these last couple of rotation spots. You just mentioned it, Shintaro Fujinami. We know the electricity that he can provide. Had a little bit of a rough second outing. First outing looked great. Was holding back a little bit. Was only 93, 94 on the gun, but we know he's going to work up to that 99, 100, 101, 100, even 2 maybe. We know that. You have other names that are doing really well. Michael Tonkin, Sean Reed Foley, Nate Lavender, right? 24-year-old Nate Lavender, who's exploding onto the scene, striking out, 7 of his first 9 batters. There's roster spots to give out. There's options here as well for these players. Shintaro Fujinami having options. Does that hinder him from getting one of those spots? Do you go with a guy like Michael Tonkin, a little bit more of a vet presence? Who do you think will land the last couple of roster spots? Like, do you think a guy like Nate Lavender, 24-year-old, has any chance of breaking this bullpen come opening day? Or do you think that a guy like Sean Reed, or not Sean Reed Fuller, because I think that he might be a little bit more realistic, depending on what happens to Drew Smith. All of these names that we're going over have one thing in common. They are waiting for what Drew Smith's fate will be, pretty much is how I see it. So who do you think, if anyone, like any under-the-radar sort of name that you would see out there come opening day? Michael Tonkin, Austin Adams, anybody like that, of that nature?
I mean, you want to try to use the 40-man first and foremost, regardless, because all organizations do it. It kind of is what it is. That was my thought even towards the end of last season, September, with a guy like Mike Vassell. Why isn't he being called up? Because they were trying to manipulate the roster spots. If you would have called him up, he would have been on the 40-man already, and then you may lose a guy before the Rule 5 drafts. Everything's a game. So now we're talking about which of the 40-man guys who also extra MLB rules, 40-man, but also who's out of options and who still has options. So that's why Fujinami may get the worst stick right there, because he's not going to be on it. Nate Lavender is not even on rostered yet. So he'll be starting out in the minor leagues. Paul Gervais will be starting out in the minor leagues. They're going to try to do it. So it comes down to guys like who, like you said, you have Lopez, who's on the 40-man. You even have Reed Garrett. You have Phil Bickford. Some of those other name guys who at least like their names are still out there and they're still rostered. I don't know how many more guys the Mets might sneak in to sign as free agents. I know they want certain DH, but depending on who else is going to get signed at this point, if we're basically shutting it down, I think we have who we have. And my only thing for Fujinami not making it automatically is because of the option, just to kind of, and maybe like you said, though, if he's only throwing low 90s even in spring, that in and of itself could be an excuse. Well, let's go ahead and break camp in Syracuse, get you to 97, 99, and then you're going to be back anyway, probably within weeks, depending on the rotation situation. If someone already has to be called up for a spot start, you may bring up a guy and then also bring him right back up anyway. I think that might be the way to go. I always like the sleeper guys like the Lopez. I want to see some guy like that in Tonkin make it, because it's pretty exciting to have that newer-ish guy fighting for his dream and making it on the Mets. So I'm okay with all the guys being listed, but it comes down to a couple of guys that darn option is going to probably cost them at the end. Even for a team that's struggling, they're not expected to win 100 games, but the competitions are getting pretty fierce in some of the smaller spots down to the end of the bench and the pen. So some guys are going to get left out, even on a team that's not with high expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I think Patty's asking, I'm not sure if you know this direct answer because I don't. Does Drew Smith have any options left? I would assume no.
No, I think he's long done, right? He's in his I can't even know what year. He's ending his ARB years at this point too. So that's why he's at the end of his service time in major leagues. Like the guy's almost a free agent at this point. That's how long it's been. So I mean, that's why we're talking about certain guys. And again, my thing with Drew Smith as a fifth, sixth inning guy, do we really want to call him that harsh of names? Or, okay, if he's coming in the seventh or eighth in a tie game, it freaks everyone out. But that's the position he's been in recent years because the Mets haven't really been doing that well anyway, regardless. So fifth, sixth inning Drew Smith, I would still take him on the roster, even over some of the guys that are having good camps or that people can be excited about right now. I think I'll still go with Drew Smith for that fifth, sixth inning role.
I like that you've taken that stance because not many people will take that stance. I've said this time and time again in this podcast. Like, I like what Drew Smith has to offer in terms of his stuff. Like, he has 97, 98 in his back pocket. He has pretty decent off speed, but it's all about his location. When he misses bad, right? I'm talking about middle up, and hitters are just driving the ball over the fence, and that is his kryptonite. So if he can get the location under wraps, okay, I love it, especially in those lower leverage situations. We're not going to be seeing a seventh inning, eighth inning Drew Smith anymore. With the likes of this bullpen and how it's been built out, yes, absolutely, Ernest is right. It's going to be fifth inning, sixth inning, and I'd like to take my chances on Drew Smith in those innings rather than those later innings that we've seen him historically be shaky in. Let's just call it a nice term for that, for the sake of the matter. But and yes, Patty, it is Jake Diekman. We are over 48. It is not Jake DeGrom. So do not be confused there. But yeah, shout out to everybody in the chat. Like I said, we got 143 people watching. Make sure you smash that thumbs up button, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, not only on my channel, but also Ernest's channel. It would mean a lot for the support on both platforms. It definitely means a lot. So, okay, we talked a little bit about pitching. We talked a little bit about a recap. I do think Shintaro Fujinami, a lot of people are excited about him, but we do have to pump the brakes in terms of that opening day roster. That option, if I had to guess, will hinder him. Was the same reason why I said DJ Stewart probably is not going to be on the opening day roster before spring training even started, let alone the fact that he's struggling mightily right now in spring training because he does have that option left. Like, that does play a huge role into the Mets decision-making process between spring training and opening day. And I think a lot of people have to look at it that way. But let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about a little bit more of a newer report. And yes, we are going down to DH Alley once more. We've been up. We've been talking about the Solaires way back when in the offseason, the hot stoves that we've done on this channel. We talked about, well, I guess we have to talk a little bit more about it congruently here with JD Davis, but also JD Martinez, because Mr. John Heyman just simply can't let this go. And whether it's coming directly from him or him acting as a middleman to Scott Boras, apparently talks are still ramping up. So we don't know. What is your take on the situation? I've said time and time again, especially down the stretch here over the last couple of weeks, I think the writing has been on the wall with what the Mets front office has stated publicly and just the way that they've gone about this whole offseason, that more or less we probably would be looking at Mark Vientos getting bulk at bats in 2024. I quite frankly, I'm gonna keep it very simple here. We do want to win this season, but it is still a developmental type season. I think that both can be accomplished. Understanding what you have in young players, but also trying to get one of those back-end wildcard spots. as we view the DH position, you see the 2023 numbers with JD Davis over there in San Francisco. 144 games, 18 home runs, hit 248, OPS of 738. Okay, that plays. Is that like everyday DH type? I mean, I guess. I don't know if you're not confident in Mark Vientos. Okay, familiar face. A lot of people were a fan of JD Davis and his time in Queens. Nonetheless, where do you stand on this topic? Where do you stand on the overall overarching DH topic for the New York Mets as it pertains to not only JD Davis, but also JD Martinez, but also trying to squeak in at bats with Mark Vientos? Because I'm under the assumption that Mark Vientos at this point cannot get sent down to AAA. That is very counterproductive. Are you taking a different stance, though?
Yeah, no, here, I guess my thought is, again, obviously, hey, spring stats, they don't mean anything. But you know what? Maybe if some of these rumors are true with the DH spot, maybe some of the reasoning behind it is some of this fake baseball has not been going very well for a lot of guys who would fit that DH spot. You got the DJ Stewart, Vientos, Choi, Voit, 4 guys. How many of them are hot this spring? So maybe this is what we got going on. Again, fake baseball, but if you're not thriving in fake baseball, certain teams, especially in the New York market, regardless, again, of what everyone thinks they're going to be doing, rebuild, reset, retool, whatever you want to call what get through the dead money year, which is my little term. But when you've got these like 4 guys all struggling, so that becomes a matter of, well, what else are you going to do? I've been mentioning it a little bit on social media. Well, there's a few of those outfield guys. You got Klay Thompson's brother. You got certain guys that are doing pretty well. So should they sneak in at the end and like take one of these spots? But would that mean they're like a DH? But if all these other guys, you can't even platoon Stewart right now, or Choi or Voit, if no one can be platooned in at DH, so maybe they do have to think outside again right at the end of camp. Because, again, if none of them are at least somewhat hot or maybe look good to them, maybe that's why we're stuck in these rumors right now, because of everyone I just named. Like, no one is, like, doing it for themselves. Just like Beatty and Vientos, the 2 of them prospect-wise or minor leaguer-wise of sorts, they're not thriving right now. And then you have all the veterans. So unless you're going to sneak in, and Iglesias kind of stopped hitting after he had a few fun games. So unless you're going to sneak in another veteran to go with, some of the other guys at the end, what are we doing here? Do we have to go ahead and spend another 10, 20 million to like sneak JD Martinez in there? Or I guess everyone's been helping to inform me anyway. JD Davis basically comes to you for nothing at this point after being released. So you're going to get a cheap bat. He did tail off in the second half. I was trying to mention that in social media. So he had a rough second half, but what are we doing? I would rather go with one of the younger guys, or again, let's just reward one of the solid guys who has other tools, the non-roster invite guys, some of the veterans. If one of them has done so well, rather than just hope that they clear waivers and get assigned to Syracuse, maybe sneak them in on the 26th man, because I don't think we're a 90-win team away from like JD Davis being added. So does that mean I want to waste at bats or like waste a spot in the lineup every day with a guy who's not going to hit? Of course not. But I just don't know if that moves the needle enough for me to be like, let's do it. Mr. Cohen, you better go sign a DH right now because all the ones in camp aren't hitting in spring. I don't know if that's enough for me still yet, especially since guys aren't even kind of geared up. They're not even facing mostly major league pitching at this point. It's all still minor league based, 2-3 at-bats at a time at best. So I just still don't know if I'm ready to make that call, although it is kind of late in the game. So a decision needs to be made. I just, in my mind, I think my mind is already at opening day, and I'm not even thinking about new guys. Maybe that's my fault.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. Like there's definitely multiple angles to look at this. And you say fake baseball, like, this is what we're saying. Like, if these rumors are somehow true and the Mets are seriously considering these guys, obviously they need to be valuing this fake baseball spring training that a lot of people say doesn't matter very seriously, right? Like that would probably spur them to get one of these names. But I agree with you. That is an excellent take, because JD Davis, what are we doing here? What needle does he move for the Mets to become what I have them as right now, as an 82 to 84 win team, to move into that, and maybe that's even generous, I'm not sure, we'll see, but to maybe an 85, 86, 87 win team, like, does that really move the needle for the Mets and JD Davis? JD Martinez, okay, you can definitely make that sort of argument for, I would say, especially if he's DHing by himself. But then again, you're taking away Mark Vientos at bats and you're pushing him to a true competition with Brett Baty. So either Brett Baty is getting hindered or Mark Vientos is getting hindered. And is that what really 2024 is all about? That's something that we have to take into consideration as well with what David Stearns has not only shown us, but also said to us now publicly. So I agree with you. JD Davis, yes, he would come on a cheap deal. He'd come for pennies. Do we need him taking up a roster spot? That is my main concern there. The concern with JD Martinez, how much is he willing to sign for? How low is his asking price really going to go? The last metric that we had on JD Martinez was $20 million before the Giants pivoted to Jorge Soler. Now, we're talking about $20 million. Even if that goes down below to like Justin Turner range in 13, 14, $15 million, you're still talking about the fourth tax bracket of this Cohen tax and making that 27, 28, $30 million for 1 year of service on JD Martinez. So, yes, he's a back-to-back-to-back all-star. Is the Mets front office really going to entertain that? And not only is the Mets front office going to entertain that, is Scott Boras going to entertain that with this sort of waiting game that he's already chosen to deploy, not only with JD Martinez, but also his other clients with Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell as well. So there's a whole evolving merry-go-round of options here, which brings up, though, like to your point, a very valid argument and a very valid question. Can we see someone not named DJ Stewart, maybe not a veteran guy like a Trace Thompson, etc., potentially crack this opening day roster? You never know. Maybe you give one of those spots to those guys. I just don't know, because also as it pertains to the offense, right? We're pivoting from pitching to offense. The whole question mark is who's grabbing this last bench spot. I really think that's the only spot up for grabs. You have Joey Wendell on your bench. You'll have Omar Narvaez on your bench. You'll have who am I forgetting on the bench? Tyrone Taylor on your bench, and then you're really going up for that fourth spot. So a lot of people here, like Aaron, G-Man Choi fan, a fan of G-Man Choi. Patty's saying the same thing. Both Carlos is saying no to JD Davis. Who would you prioritize for this last bench spot? You got names like DJ Stewart. I think he's going to be hindered by that option. Also, not a fan of his lack of sample size last season in 2023. I think it was a very, I want to say lucky month stretch that he did well. He definitely earned that $1.5 million tendered contract, but I just don't think he's a long-term realistic option at the major league level for the Mets. So who in your mind would you at this point prioritize? For me, I know it's a short sample size, but Trace Thompson looks kind of good. He looks kind of good right now. So who would you prioritize for this last bench spot before we get into your bread and butter and talk about some New York Mets prospects before we end the stream? What do you think?
I mean, if you would have asked me like last week, then I think I was on the Choi train big time.
Yeah.
I know he had some walks. I mean, you got to go with what you can with certain things in spring games. And the numbers were looking kind of nice overall with the walks and stuff. So I was kind of a Choi fan up until last week. Now, I don't know, a couple of games, you have a couple of hitless games in spring. What does it really mean? But he was a guy that now a guy like Thompson, when you have Taylor, but you know what? You got Bader and Marte. You got two huge question marks to even just physically be on the field. So is there a way to kind of crowbar those two outfielders to at least break camp on the bench? And then you got to count on Wendell to do a whole bunch of stuff, but that's kind of what he does. Maybe that would be the route to go. And then again, in my world, then what else are we doing here? Is that going to cut it? Would that work? And then do you still break camp with a Vientos as an everyday DH, or just kind of throw in Choi as a platoon. But as far as guys to play the positions, definitely, should they have to go to an extra outfielder because of the outfielders they have? I mean, it sucks to think about that, but when you got Bader and Marte with these kind of like thoughts, or maybe they're just my thoughts, right? But should they go that route and go with Thompson right at the end? It'd be pretty interesting to see. But again, it's always about 40-man stuff. Even some of the top prospects, I don't think Acuna can just show up right now. So he's going to need time in AAA. Same with Gilbert. Some of the top guys are going to need to break camp in AAA. They haven't had one of those like leaps. I don't think we have a Conforto right now that's just going to show up. So I just feel that if it's not Choi and Thompson would be my guys off the top of my head. I don't know who else can sneak in. I thought Iglesias, if he would keep hitting a little bit per game to go with that defense, maybe they would have kind of crowbarred him right at the end of the bench for defense. But the outfield, it's going to scare me until I see it happening for like a month or two. It is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's something that you have to take into consideration as well. That's why I think Tyrone Taylor might have bigger contributions to this team than people think. One of those guys goes down. You got a versatile fourth outfielder, and Tyrone Taylor can play all three outfield positions, does pretty well at the bat. We'll see him a lot. And like I said, it's really anyone's guess. Do they prioritize lefties on the bench because you already have two lefties slotted in on that bench right now? Would they go with the third one in DJ Stewart or G-Man Choi? Or would they like to do a little 2-2, two righties, two lefties, and maybe prioritize a Trace Thompson, like you said? So that's why I'm kind of leaning more Trace Thompson as that righty option. But if they don't believe in Mark Vientos getting those consistent everyday DH at bats and you want to do a platoon, that's where your lefty comes in. And that's where I'd probably say G-Man Choi, whatever happens in spring training, is that opening day preliminary guy. So that's kind of where I'm thinking about it. But let's get into the bread and butter of this topic, this segment, this live stream, where you thrive. And this is where the chat, I want you all to start providing your great questions to Ernest. Like I said at the top of the stream, this is Ernest Dove. He covers the St. Lucie Mets, very heavily involved in reporting on the Mets farm system, Mets prospects, not only your top guys like your Luis Angel Acuñas, like your Drew Gilberts, but also names that you may not immediately see in the top 30 right now, whether it's just performance-based or just age-wise. So we're going to talk about your top 5 under-the-radar prospects that maybe some Mets fans haven't heard of. This is going to be very new to me because I'm in the more of like the top 20, top 25 prospect range. I don't really go beyond that in terms of doing my deep dive, right? And I hate to say that. I should be well informed, but I just simply don't have enough time to go past the top 25 prospects in this farm system, in addition to who's ever trying to vie and make a case for themselves here on the opening day roster, right, in the Major League roster. So want to go into the top 5 under the radar prospects and then get a little bit of, I think there's a couple of questions saying maybe some player comps to some of the more main prospects like your Drew Gilberts and Luis Angel Acuñas. So chat, Q&A time, but also Ernest, I want to hear about these under the radar prospects. Maybe we can educate not only myself, but educate the chat, because I know you have some names that a lot of Mets fans not only should be looking out for, but maybe have never heard before. So let's hear it.
Oh, I got more than 5. I can go 50. You got all
I love it.
Let's sit here till midnight. I already told you even before the show that I got at least 6 written down. I have like 30 more in my head. I could even start sprawling off a few, but as far as if I wanted to give a couple of names out there, consider it a top 5-ish of sorts. One of the guys I talk a lot about social media online. So one of the guys is Jeffrey Rosa. He's a 19-year-old outfielder. Some of my guys who follow me on social media, they've been hearing about him for all year long from last year. I call him Jeffrey Barry Bonds Rosa. And why do I say that? Because this kid, he played last year at that age 18-ish to 19 range in the DSL, Dominican Summer League. Played 44 games, right? 44 games, 15 home runs, 13 doubles. So he had 28 extra base hits in 44 games. He had a ridiculous OPS, a ridiculous everything. So, but what I also like about Jeffrey Rosa, besides light tower power. He's like the Pete Alonso of like the DSL. He also is a really strong outfielder, corner outfielder. And I was told by some of the Mets staff, he may have one of the strongest arms in the entire minor league farm system for the Mets. So when you have a teenager with one of the strongest arms in the entire system who has 15 home runs in 44 games, he's pretty interesting. Now, obviously, way down Dominican Summer League. Hopefully, obviously, if he comes stateside, it's going to be starting out at the bottom, probably the Florida Complex League. So got a long way to go. I'm sure with guys like this who have that kind of power, you want to see how it translates with more off-speed pitches, older pitchers in their 20, 21, 22, throwing more junk at you. So there's going to be a lot to prove. But I'm huge on Jeffrey Rosa just because, again, along with that power, he's viable. He's good as a corner outfielder and as one of the strongest arms in the system. Another kid, 18 years old, Branny DeOlio. He's also, I was told, he's very good, a lot of skills. They knew he would catch the ball, so they liked his defense from the time he was signed as one of those 16, 17-year-olds. And they knew he could make a lot of contact. And then last year, he makes his pro debut in the DSL, and he hits 313, 403 on-base percentage. So he had a really good start to his year. And he's one of those guys, talk about injuries. The DSL had multiple injuries to start the year, so he started playing every day. He might not have even been an everyday player. He had to play, and he took off the entire season as a guy took advantage of his opportunities. So keep an eye on Branny DeOlio. I might as well get even younger just to mess with everybody's brains.
I love it. Let's do it.
The Mets had an IFA signing who played his season as a 16-year-old last year. His name is Kiever Garcia. So he's kind of a very young middle infielder. I think he got a couple of games in, I believe, maybe at another position, but mostly middle infield. And what I was told by some staff is that this young kid, at the time of signing as the projectability, they saw him as a 60 run grade, 60 hit grade. Now, that's pretty high, especially for a kid this age. They also probably thought he was going to go for a higher bonus, but they were able to get him. So they were very super excited about this kid. They just feel he's got very raw talent. He did mix in a couple of games at third base defensively, but absolutely long way to go. For all I know, he might even repeat the DSL because he's only 17 years old right now as we speak. So he's one of those kids to keep an eye on because it could be one of those IFA kids you hear about in a couple of years. Now, getting a little bit, let's go a tiny bit older. I have a pitcher from the St. Lucie Mets last year, or a couple of them. I'm going to ring them off right now. Lionel Ovias. He's a 20-year-old right-handed pitcher. He's really young. He has one of the better sliders in the Mets farm system, is what I was told by coaches. So this is a 20-year-old with one of the best sliders in the entire system. So that sounds pretty exciting, that on and of itself. He's known as more of a strike thrower by nature. The stats have been up and down of sorts during the season last year, but the staff feels, do not count this kid out. So Lionel Ovias has pretty hardcore stuff at 20 years old, and again, one of the best sliders.
And just so we're clear before we continue, you're on a roll, and I hate to stop it. You're on a roll. I just was like letting you spit for a second, but I want to get the viewers' I guess minds acclimated to when we can expect just hypothetically a transition maybe to one of the upper tiers of the minor league farm system, or even a projectability, if you can even go that far, to the major league club. Just a little bit of background on those guys.
Yeah, that's the thing too. A lot of these guys are going to be so young. So Rosa, Branny DeOlio, Kiever Garcia, they're all going to be in the low minors in 2024. So it's going to be how high do I feel they can jump on the top 20 prospect lists after the year? Those are three guys I think that'll all show up in the top 30, top 20 by the end of the year based on projectability and talent. Now, someone like an Ovias who pitched in low A and high A last year, at his age, with some of the quirks that he's working on, and I was hearing some things about his overall ability, and he was working through some stuff last year, even on and off the field. So he's the kind of guy, he may even repeat Brooklyn. So I was trying to think, a guy like Lionel Ovias, he may repeat Brooklyn, or he may show up in Double-A. But my thing is, with the Mets right now, with their rotation issues and everything else, it's trickling down to Syracuse. And by the time they break camp with some of the veterans, everyone's going to get kind of sent back a slot.
Right.
I was even hearing some of the top pitching prospects in the Mets organization, even before it's Kodai Senga, they thought they were going to be repeating Double-A. So you got to keep that in mind. Some guys might be a little bit pushed back, not necessarily their fault, but because their Mets are kind of pounding the veterans at Triple-A with what they have to do. Now, an Ovias is one of those swing guys, could be high A, could be Double-A. He could be in Brooklyn at some point in 2024, basically. So like an Ovias, best case scenario, could be in the majors in about 3 years. And I'm not even sure, to be honest with you, I'm not even fully sure if he'll be a starter or a reliever, because I've been wanting the Mets to kind of transition more guys to the pen. Right. They just haven't been doing it. But Ovias is pretty interesting. So, and another really young, again, I have all young guys. I love it. I love the younger pitchers. Sure. One guy who basically got drafted a couple years ago and just completely disappeared. He was basically injured for a while. We have Jonah Tom, who's now 20 years old. He's kind of a tall-ish right-hander. He's one of those guys who was already pumping 97 in rehab last spring, because he started late to the season. But Jonah Tom, he's just a pure fireballer. His future in a few years, he could be one of those hard-throwing guys. Maybe he's another projectable reliever who throws 97 to 99, in the upper minors. I'd be pretty excited about Jonah Tom with the thing about command. Location. So yep. He shows up, gets into some games last year in the low minors, throwing 95 plus, but with a lot of walks. So that's the projectability. And do we transition guys like this or a young pitcher like this to the pen? But when you're already throwing 95, 97 at 19 years old, 20 years old, that's something you can build on depending on the pitching lab, depending on the mechanics, how they're going to work the off-speed stuff right now. Because the thing is, he's got to do a better job of certain things, keeping the ball low and the sliders and everything else. But the overall arm is pretty good. Now, again, location, command. One of my favorite pitchers in the Mets organization, who also pitched in low A, high A, as a left-hander, Felipe de la Cruz. Felipe de la Cruz, 22 years old, left-hander who throws mid-90s. So right then and there, you don't really have a lot of lefty starters in a farm system throwing 95.
Love that.
So again, now,
that's amazing.
Here's the thing, command. So he's the guy, he has to command his breaking pitch and his fastball. Can he keep the fastball up and the slider down? Based on the way he throws, that's what the staff are looking for, and it's been up and down. At his best, he probably gives you 6 innings, 11 Ks. He's that kind of kid. But when he's off, that's when you get the 4.2 inning, 5 walks, 3 runs, because based on the walks and 1 bad pitch. But he's a guy that if he puts it all together, you can't teach 95 for a lefty. And especially when the coaches are feeling he can maintain his velocity, so he could stay as a starter. Another young pitcher that the MILB pipeline, they just moved him into their top 30 in their latest updated Mets prospect list, is for Saul Garcia, who's only 20 years old, another one of my guys who pitched in low A, end of the season in Brooklyn. So again, guys like Felipe de la Cruz, Saul Garcia, hopefully best case scenario, they're in Binghamton and Double-A for 2024. So they're going to be really close. A lot of these guys are bunched up. But he's a very, very, very talented arm. They have him as having real stuff. It's about command. So they're worried about the walks and spurts. So it's not even about every inning. Sometimes there's a spurt. There's something that clicks the wrong way and the walks come, and then 3 innings of just straight fire. And what I was told last year, which is probably why he's also being ranked now, the staff were saying in the league he was in, low A, high A, the hitters did not want to face him. They basically were teaching themselves patience and looking for the walk, because if they didn't get the walk, they were in trouble. That's the kind of talent Saul Garcia has. He's more of a fastball slider guy. He can touch 96. So you got a young 20-year-old right-hander, can touch 96, really good fastball slider combo. He's got that sweeper, which the Mets are all in on sweepers. It's like the talk of the town all off season. I'm hearing about sweeper and cutter, sweeper, cutter. A lot of the Mets minor leaguers are all being taught the sweeper, taught the cutter, or they're improving it on the mechanics of it from the pitching lab. So, yeah, those are some of the names I'm throwing out. I can throw out 30 more, but I might as well slow down. But those are some of the names I want more of the fans to kind of keep an eye on. I have other guys to think about that may be more in the upper minors. A guy interviewed, a hitter named DeAndre Smith, super talented athlete. Even by his own admission in the interview, he talked about, hey, man, I'm still learning the game. He was a college bat, but he's going through the process of learning. Even he was in the pitching lab because the hitters can do it too, putting all that stuff together to learn about some of their mechanics at the plate. There's just so many players that can be hitting that AA, AAA level, including all the pitching prospects that I'm excited about. But those are some of the guys you may not hear about, but in some new prospect lists by like mid-year, end of next year, you might start seeing some of these guys in the Mets top 20. So you can just say, I heard it here first.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the information you get from Ernest directly and here on the CPNYSports True Mets Talk podcast. And Ernest, that is, I'm just sitting there like names I've never heard of before as well. I have to admit, and I'm sure a lot of people in the chat can say the same thing. Like Jonah Tong, like Felipe De La Cruz. I cannot just value that enough. And a couple of trends that I did notice that you were talking about was obviously that we can see already in the major league sort of I guess space, right? Or competing for that major league role right now is the sweeper cutter combination. That is refreshing, and it's good to see that is consistently being I guess taught down that far down. Like that is something that they want to start early and often. But also, like, do you have any reason as to why? And I heard you mention this up front, was they're just not, I guess, prioritizing these pitchers right now that might project more of better bullpen arms than starters. Why are they not starting that early and often in their, I guess, professional careers? Whereas I guess they're just sort of leaving them out there as starters right now. Is that kind of the consensus?
It's kind of been that thing. I know one of the guys who showed up in a spring game, Junior Santos, if you remember when he pitched like a week or two ago for the Mets, and he was one of those super tall, hugely built young kids from the IFA class years ago. He was pumping 97 forever. And it just didn't seem like it was clicking as a starter. And I've been waiting for years. And then finally, by last year, like he's finally a full-time reliever. And he had a lot of up and downs in his stats in AA. And there he is throwing some fire right now in a major league spring game. But finally, he's transitioned. And I know there's other guys that they eat a lot of innings. The Mets, like a lot of teams, they have guys who just eat innings. And they go starter, reliever, starter, reliever. Even one of my favorite guys in the Mets system, David Griffin, he's an older pitcher in the system who's already been doing really well in AA and AAA. David Griffin, on any given night, he's in AA or AAA, and he could be starting or relieving. Like it just kind of goes with the territory. Someone gets called up. We need you in Syracuse to do a start. Someone gets sent back, or someone hits a rehab game. They send them a AA, and they may need him to relieve in AA. The system kind of does that a lot, but also with some of the top prospects and the top draft picks or the top signing bonus kids, they start all the way to like AA, and then that's the show me level. So that's why I was like, at some point, how soon can they start transitioning guys quicker? I know for the bats from last year, the Mets were basically playing everyone multiple positions in the minor leagues. It was awesome, but right. Pitching wise, you're still mostly starter reliever, except for some of those David Griffin guys who he eats the innings. He's an upper minors guy. I see him as awesome. He would be an undrafted guy if he makes it to the majors. So that would be an incredible accomplishment for him, going from undrafted to indie ball to the majors. That would be insane. But even he shows up in a major league spring game pumping 95. It's the highest he's thrown. And he's one of those guys who he wasn't even really a pitcher back in like amateur days. So he's kind of like starting late in the game as a pitcher. So he may still also develop even more at this point. And that's, again, with the pitching lab. lot of all the minor leaguers I talked to at the end of last year, they all showed up at the pitching lab, and then they were given this curriculum for the entire offseason on what to do and what to work on based on the lab. And I feel like some of these guys, even into spring right now, the velocity's going up. I even heard from international scouts in the DSL, Dominican summer leagues, some of those kids are the velocity's up right now as well. So like farm system wise, velocity's going up. The sweepers and cutters are being like worked on and taught. Tyler Stewart basically learned the cutter from a Mets coach last year, and he already has a ridiculous slider. So you have certain guys even improving their arsenal, and they're already ranked. So that's a top 20 ranked pitcher in the Mets organization learning a new pitch out of nowhere. So there he is, could be in AA, AAA already with a new pitch to go with one of the best sliders in the system. Hey, those are the exciting things to think about with the analytics in the lab now.
And before we get into some of the questions here, we're going to do a rapid fire with some of the questions that we have for you, Ernest. Let's talk about that pitching lab here just for a couple minutes. Is this something that we've never seen before with the New York Mets organization, this pitching lab? Like, was it customary to give these players this curriculum? Like, yes, obviously everyone knows what they have to work on in the offseason, but was it ever this structured from what you're hearing? Because these pitchers that are developing that new pitch that already have lethal off-speed pitches, like you said, in Tyler Stewart, this is something that's changing the ball game. And this is like, not only this pitching lab is not only accessible, right, that we know to the major league guys, like this is being flowed all the way down. And this is something that the Mets, obviously, you've heard from Steve Cohen himself, like we are a little bit behind in the pitching lab game compared to other major league organizations. But that is something that has been an emphasis over the last couple of seasons. So it sounds like with what you're saying, it's already paying major dividends and we can reap the benefit of those, I guess, rewards, so to speak, here very shortly. Is that sort of what we're getting at here?
Yeah, I mean, once after Cohen took over, I had started speaking to some coaches and some of the minor league coordinators and pitching, and they were saying some of the resources are now flooding in. But yeah, from last year, the whole pitching lab thing with this aura and the myth of it. But basically, the main understanding that I have is it's kind of one of those teachable things. Like you're in a classroom, you do this stuff with all these things all over your body. They have these plates on the mound. But I like the idea of the information that was given after. And some of these guys, like even Mike Vassell, is really a student of the game. So he's processing all of this information and staying in, because usually guys will stay in touch anyway. All off season, minor leaguers are in touch with the coaches. They'll do Zoom videos, they'll do phone calls. But now you're adding in the extra element of, hey, here's what we're doing with even through your nutritionist and the mechanics. A lot of it now, you have the extra padding of this pitching lab stuff, kind of determining certain ways to throw or the mechanics of it, your lower body versus your upper body. So some of the movements to go along with your plan for the entire offseason, I'm hoping what's happening right now is what's happening. The velocity is going up. Some of the guys' mechanics, they feel are looking better. I've only talked to a few of the minor league hitters about their side of things in the pitching lab, and some of them thought it was pretty cool and exciting. And again, everything from nutritionist to player development, everything is being meshed in with some of these results of how to work out going forward based on this information.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It's actually just insane to think about all this new sort of technology that these teams now are deploying on not only major league ready players, but all the way down through these lower levels. And I know you've done interviews with Tyler Stewart. I believe you also had Mike Vassell directly on your channel doing an interview talking about their experiences with this pitching lab and these processes that are being deployed. Like I said, guys, if you do not subscribe to Ernest YouTube, make sure you do so, and you can hear exactly what these prospects that we may even see in Queens here this season or as soon as next season as well are saying about their experiences in this minor league farm system. So great stuff all across the board. Let's get into some questions here. Like I said, if you are tuning into here, drop your questions. I have a couple starred here, so I'm going to start off with this one. Obviously talking more about your major prospects here that are more ready to come up. Do you have any player comps for these major prospects? Like if you see a Jet, obviously a lot of people with the stature are like, okay, that's Jose or that's Altuve, right? Like obviously, right? But any sort of like things that you see with their game, and it doesn't have to just be Jet Williams. I'm talking about your Drew Gilberts. Drew Gilbert's an interesting guy to me. He's my favorite prospect.
Yeah.
Fun fact, if you all didn't know that in the chat, he's my favorite prospect because I think he's a true 5-tool player. I think he has everything that it takes both offensively and defensively to be a 5-tool player at the next level. So that's where I'm kind of heading toward that. But I'm talking about actual like player comps. Do you have any that stick out directly in your head right now, or not so much? Is it not too early to tell, but just like on the spot? It's a tough on the spot question.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those, what is it? Everybody always tries the same ones for Jet Altuve. Or was it Dustin Pedroia? Maybe it was even Pedroia too. So it's something about let's call him a mix of Pedroia and Altuve just to freak everybody out. The Drew Gilbert one, I saw a hilarious comp to like Lenny Dykstra based on him being a grinder and a hard worker. I don't know how much about the pure baseball aspect of hits and power, but it's just a funny comp. Again, Lenny Dykstra, the baseball player. Let's not get into
right.
So, he's a pretty interesting guy. Acuna, he's so hard to figure out right now because I liked him. I like seeing him. I know his power numbers looked higher in the other AA league with the Rangers. And then when he came to the Mets, the power died. Other things went up, but the speed is still there. So if you have and he's also kind of like under 5'10" between him and Jet. So it's kind of one of those things. Do you consider Acuna, do they have to like max out at trying to be some level below a Pedroia and below an Altuve? They're both kind of like the same-ish kind of player. I guess defensively, I would like Acuna more as a middle infielder, and I think Jet I would like to see spend more time in center field, or if he has to fall back at second base. But I think Acuna can basically still handle short and second either way as more of that kind of role. I would like to see Jet Williams more in center field. But, yeah, those are the interesting kind of like the only comps you could really kind of think of. But, again, Jet has pop. So I think Jet at an absolute ceiling can hit 20 home runs. Acuna, it's very weird. The power wasn't showing at one affiliate. It was showing more in the other. Can he put enough hit tool to go with that speed? I liked his defense overall. I don't even know if either one can really play third base. So I just see these are all middle infielders. But Drew Gilbert, he could be that guy. Hard to comp him, but if he's one of those grind that out kind of guys, he's one guy who might show up in Queens, in 2024, even above everybody else. Well, he'll need a spot because Acuna's already on the 40-man. So Gilbert may have to take one very soon, at least by summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I was kind of going with Acuna as well. I was like, he's probably a middle infielder, but do you extend him out to third base to see what he's got, given the struggles of third base? His arm is definitely there. The arm action really isn't because he's more of a short arm. I saw a very good comp of him and Jose Reyes, so I did a little bit more video analysis of it, and it really is all the way through the work through of the ground ball from top to bottom, and the follow through with the throw does look a lot like Jose Reyes there from short, but I don't know how much that short arm action is going to translate over from a third base position. But that was just preliminary kind of thinking. I think he does profile, I agree with you, a lot better for that middle infield spot, especially when we don't know what the future status of Jeff McNeil on this team is going to be. Ricardo asking about another guy that obviously got a lot of hype very early on, but I've heard some quiet rumblings here maybe within the past year or so, at least from what I've heard. Maybe I'm just completely out of tune. But talk to us about Calvin Ziegler.
Well, he's one of those disappearing act young pitchers. So, I did hear a lot of good things about him. He's also a guy, I think, already as a teenager, he could always get the 95 plus. And then he just completely fell off the face of the earth with injuries. So now he's one of those guys, probably like a Jonah Tong. All of 2024, it's going to be like, is Ziegler pitching and where? He might still maybe he'll be in low A, just kind of get things rolling. But he could be one of those. Now, as far as like a future ceiling projection, I don't know if you can see him as a frontline starter because it's like it's been the draft and high school pick. He kind of fell off the map. So now we just have to wait out the entire year to see what kind of pitcher he can be. I have to see the health. I have to. I only heard small snippets of, he's a really talented pitcher, really solid arm. But then once you hit the minor league IL, it's like witness protection program. So I don't ask, they don't tell. So it's hard to get information. Just like with Matt Allen, it's like, Ern, what's up with Matt Allen? You know what? Don't ask, don't tell. It's always been my policy for years. I was able to, mention the Jonah Tong thing when he was rehabbing because he was already on his way back. The very small snippets you'll ever get from me on pitchers like this is when they're basically like right about to show up. And that's when I feel more comfortable disclosing certain information like that. But with Ziegler, we have to wait. This could be like a 4-year thing, waiting on him to go up the levels and be healthy and see if he could still be a starter, reliever. If the mid-90s, is that going to maintain and all that? We're going to have to wait that out with Ziegler.
Yeah, very good point. Like I said, after there was so much hype up front, and then it's just sort of like you said, a disappearing act, which was a very great question by Ricardo. So I was curious to get your thoughts on this as well. And Carlos Ramos here is asking, not under the radar related, but out of the starting pitching prospects, we've mentioned, right, Mike Vasil, who's been appearing on your podcast. We all know Christian Scott, who has exploded onto the scene, and a lot of people think he's going to be even better than a Mike Vasil. We've seen him also appear in spring training as well. Who makes the main roster? Probably the only competition is between those two about first coming up to the major leagues. I would have to guess maybe you have Dominic Campbell, but probably not. But definitely tell us, who do you think gets that opportunity first?
Yeah, see, my thing is, for a while, I was more into Mike Vasil because he got up there the quickest to AAA. And again, he had a no-hitter going into the ninth in the AAA game. So he was that guy that I know some people thought probably should have got that September call-up. But like I said, that's where roster manipulation probably comes in, among other things, because you don't want to use up a 40-man spot right before the offseason on someone like that. I would think still that Mike Vasil would be the first man up. But then Christian Scott, just a healthy Christian Scott, just came not really out of nowhere because the talent was already there, but he just completely skyrocketed. And now he's considered the number one pitching prospect in the Mets organization. They might have had him maybe behind Tidwell, Vasil, then Scott, and then maybe Stewart and Hamill are fighting it out. And then Scott just blew up. And when I was talking with some of the coaches throughout the year last year, I remember I was even messaging one of the Mets staff, and I was informing them, like, did you know Christian Scott's hitting 98 right now on the gun in AA? He said, what? So, I mean, they knew about the talent, but they were worried about him getting back to that point eventually during 2023. And then he's already pumping 97, 98. So now they always saw him as the real deal. I know there was a comp of sorts to Tyler McGill as far as not pure player by player, but to use a fun Mets reference, they were thinking of Christian Scott having a Tyler McGill meteoric rise to the majors, basically.
Right.
From not pitching a lot, having some minor injuries here and there in the minors, and then exploding to majors. They were comparing Scott to McGill in that fashion. And again, I'm talking like high-end McGill, not like, oh, he had a bad – I'm talking about like on the high-end surface, they were excited about the idea of Christian Scott having that rise like a McGill. So he may end up actually being the first call-up depending on how things go, because I would like to see him and Vasil in AAA. I just don't know who else is going to be joining them because I don't know how many veterans are going to get kicked down to Syracuse.
Right. That is the biggest question as well. And that's the biggest like talk of the town when it comes to these top end starting pitching prospects is like Vasil versus Scott. Well, we know the projections, right? And the ceilings for Mike Vasil, everyone says low end starter in a rotation. Christian Scott, maybe a mid-level to maybe even number 2. But that is an interesting comp in terms of the actual rise. Tyler McGill versus Christian Scott. That is a really good, I guess, picture that's painted for us to understand that level of excitement, because a lot of people forget before the last couple of years played out, a lot of people were very high on Tyler McGill. He was pumping what, 99, 100 miles per hour. Everyone's like, this guy is bound to be the next Mets ace, but it just really hasn't translated for one reason or another into that. So that's a good, very comparison to sort of paint that picture in terms of the overall hype of it. Yeah, absolutely. Zach is asking, if you can get to this question. Yes, we can, Zach. We always have time for you, Zach. Don't worry. How does Ernest view our top end pitching prospects, and how do they stack up against pitching prospects across the league?
See, that's the thing. I could run off like 7 or 8 pitchers. I just named a few. Then you have Sproat. I mean, you have a bunch of arms, but the idea is, I think what's going on in like top 100 lists, it seems like nobody likes the Mets except Christian Scott is blooming so much. I think he's getting into that mix of top 100. I feel like what's going on is that determine, are any of these guys destined for the bullpen perhaps? Either way, from Vasil to Tidwell to Hamill to Stewart, everyone keeps projecting like, well, maybe they'll be best in the pen. And I think that's what's hurting the Mets farm system right now as far as how it's being viewed by others. I don't necessarily feel the same way as some of the other people do. I feel there's a lot of starter potential in all of them. I mean, if you were to make me choose between certain guys, I would like to see another full season from a guy like Hamill to see if he can maintain more consistency in his dominance, because when he's insane. He's another guy, 6 innings, 11 Ks, or it's going to be 3 innings and 5 walks. It's going to be based on the mix. So I think what's happening is a lot of other organizations, you see the names in the top 100 and they're fireballers and they're seen as like frontline guys. I think the idea is, along with the Major League Mets rotation to break camp, we seem to have a lot of mid to back end rotation projectable guys right now. Whereas other systems, they hype their top guys as frontline starters in the top 100. That seems to be the difference publicly and on a lot of the lists.
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly like how true that is in terms of the evaluation standpoint, but we all know these lists love to be about Mets. Like they love to skimp the Mets, and that's been a consistent thing. So yeah, I agree. Like all jokes aside, I agree. Like the Mets are actually very, I think, well better off than a lot of people give them credit for in the pitching sort of realm of things, right? You're not even talking about your Hamels, your Tidwell or your Vasils or your Scotts. You're talking about your Tidwells, your Sproats, your Stewarts, like you said. I didn't even know Tyler Stewart was like 6'10". I didn't even know that. He's like 6'9", 6'10", right?
He's a large human being. Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
He's a very large human being. It takes a lot to feed that man. Yeah, he's a big dude. He's a big boy. And again, I was already told from last year, he basically had a major league slider last year, and then he's improved it. And he has a cutter, and he throws 5 pitches. So once everything is clicking with more experience for another year, for all I know, he's going to explode over everyone. Or Tidwell has so much talent. I think it was Tim Healy wrote an article last year about Tidwell was making a whole bunch of adjustments, even from like grips and everything. There was a lot going on in his player development last year with some of the up and down performances. But
right,
this whole Mets farm system is full of guys. When they're on, they're 10 strikeout guys. Now, how consistent are a few of them going to continue to be to make that next step? Because again, Tidwell, could he be a frontline guy, an SP2 guy? Can Scott do that? Now we have to worry about, AAA, really. Let's get them to the final stages, which I think pretty much all of them could pitch in the Syracuse rotation, but I don't know when, thanks to the Mets circus. and waiting on what veterans are going to have to be kicked back to Syracuse again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to have to happen soon in terms of that talent evaluation, because this rotation next offseason can't afford to sort of just go out there in free agency and trade and fill every sort of spot. Worst case scenario, right? You're talking about a couple guys under contract, obviously Kodai Senga, but outside of him, no one's pretty much guaranteed. If Sean Manaea goes out there and kills it, he's going to opt out of his deal. Or if he doesn't do well, how confident are the Mets in Sean Manaea taking the rotation spot next year, knowing that he can be a bullpen guy anyway? So there's a lot of like question marks that the Mets are going to have to figure out answers to. And a lot of these prospects that we're talking about on this very stream, we will get answers on hopefully here very soon. Last question, because I do know that we are about an hour and a half into the stream, and I apologize. It's been a very fun time. So this time has gone very quickly. Like, this is a great conversation. Last one from Carlos is saying, another question for Ernest. Do you think McGill will eventually be transitioned into the bullpen? Do you think he has great bullpen stuff? Because this is a guy that the Mets tried that little bullpen stint, didn't look too well doing it, didn't look comfortable out there doing it. But you would like look at surface level and say this guy could be an elite bullpen guy if he doesn't figure it out in the starting rotation. But we just haven't seen that yet. Do you think they give it another crack, or do you think that they're pretty much set on he is what he is? Let's hope that he just progresses from here.
Well, that's the thing too. Again, with a guy like Senga going down, with the entire rotation outside of Senga not being under contract, so future-wise, it'd be pretty interesting. And I think the idea of McGill as like a back end 8th, 9th inning guy, it sounds good because of his kind of bulldog mentality / calmness. I know it's talked about a lot, I think, on SNY and everything. Like, hey, he could be a real cool, calm, and collective guy, but he's super confident. They felt he had insane stuff. I was hearing about him from the minors, and they were like, dude, this guy walks around like he knows. Like, not the thing with an ego, but I'm saying he knows he has it. And that type of, mentality, it probably looks good in the pen as well. So if you combine that with, again, if he gets back to like 99 throwing 1 or 2 innings, maybe that's why if he gets back to like 99 for an inning and he has that mentality and calmness, that's probably what that stereotypical back end super pen all-star guy could be. So maybe that's the ceiling of sorts on the pen, reliever-wise thing. But I'm sure, obviously, like a Lugo situation, I'm sure he's going to want to be a starter for as long as possible, and this is definitely the year to do it. So I want to see how the new pitch works. But again, even down the road within 2-3 years, with that mentality, that bulldog mentality, he's a big, strong guy. If he can throw it up to 97, 99 again in 1 inning spurts, you could see him being able to handle that type of pressure, though, for sure, I would think. So maybe that's why the idea keeps coming up, because of how he's perceived like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. But that's been great. This has been great. Listen, Ernest, this has been a truly wonderful conversation. Hour and a half into the stream. I thought we were going for 45 to an hour. I am very happy to get this extended version. I think a lot of people in the chat are very happy as well to learn about some of these prospects that we've gone over that many people may not know, especially on the pitching side, to go over and reiterate our thoughts and opinions on the main prospects in this organization. So that is going to be the stream, and that's where we're going to cut it. I want to thank you first and foremost for taking this extended time on this podcast. It definitely means a lot. We've received some great feedback already in the chat. We got Patty saying subscribe to your channel. Very good info. We got Zach saying already following you. Great stuff to both myself and you. Good to learn more about what's going on in the depths of the farm system. A lot of positive feedback. Carlos appreciates you answering his question, and Carlos also Ortiz saying he likes the show. Darren as well. We appreciate all the comments. So I want to sort of give this floor to you. Like I said, if people weren't here in the openings of the stream, right, when we went over where they can find you, what you're doing, I just want you to reiterate that, because I definitely do think you need a lot more love on YouTube. Get him to 300 subscribers. He's very close to being there. And as always, 200 plus people in this chat across YouTube and X. Number has grown since we started this stream tonight. As always, venture on over to YouTube, hit that thumbs up. And if you don't subscribe to my channel, make sure you subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, the icon as you watch this. And then shortly after, as always, go subscribe to Ernest's channel. Does phenomenal content. Please tell everybody where you're going to be at, your blogs, your YouTube videos, your interviews, all that good stuff.
Yeah, again, shout out to anybody who's just been following me over the years. I really appreciate it. Obviously on Twitter X at my Ernest Dove name. Same for YouTube. If you can please subscribe to the channel. Hopefully throughout the year, there'll be more interviews, more player interviews. Maybe I'll start shooting more videos of the game action for the St. Lucie Mets games. Shout out to all the guys on SportsWire Radio. That's SPORTZ, wireradio.org. And also to the guys at Max Mets at maxmets.blogspot.com. That's where you get your daily blogs all day and night, pretty much. There's all kind of countless articles going out. Major leagues, minor leagues, everything you want in the Mets is from there. And again, yeah, I'm really thankful to continue to be doing this. I will have media credentials again for the 2024 season for the St. Lucie Mets. So I'm really excited, and thank you to the Mets organization for providing me with credentials again for the new year. So yeah, keep on the lookout. The more interviews are coming. I do have some young bats, and I have another pitcher in mind, and I'm really excited about even some of the upper minors guys. Like shout out Carlos Cortez, who's been having a pretty hot major league camp. He's been doing pretty well. He's one of those guys, been around for a minute, and I'm really excited about a guy like Carlos Cortez to see what can happen in 2024. And hey, man, shout out to you for having me on the show, and let's obviously stay in touch, and let's go Mets.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely would like to do a little bit of a rehash of this whenever we both get the opportunity. Would be great to have you back on. As always, let's go Mets, everyone. Obviously, a tough game to watch today with the spring training. Obviously, beyond just a score, we're not going to be box watching the score here in spring training, especially this early on. It's about midway, ever so slowly approaching opening day, but it's about the names that we see in that box score and who's doing well, who's not, and putting a little bit more stock into it. We don't want to judge the entire picture off of these performances here very early on, but as Ernest said during the stream, there is something to be said where the front office is still watching this fake baseball and making decisions accordingly. As always, though, you guys know where to find me on X and Instagram at CPNYSports, the very same handle as my YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing if you haven't. Make sure you're hitting that thumbs up, commenting off after the fact. If you're watching the replay, comment your thoughts and opinions and hit that thumbs up. And as always, channel memberships are live. You get perks. Pre-recorded episodes are going to be released early to members. You get special emojis like that Francisco Lindor emoji, the put it in the books emoji during these live streams that everyone can utilize, especially during our post-game lives this season. When the Mets win, those put them in the books emojis are going to be spammed. You can make no mistake about it. And as always, like I said, just overall channel memberships, check those out. I definitely appreciate the support on that as well. I appreciate it. Thank you all. LGM, let's go Mets, and we will see you all on the next live stream. It's been your boy CP with the first time guest and hopefully recurring guest sometime in the future, Ernest Dove. We'll see y'all later. Peace.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tapping on that notifications button and checking out